Have you ever realized that you might be giving so much that you have lost yourself? You've given so much to everyone else that you've lost touch with who you are, what you feel, what you like, what you enjoy, what you need, even. Overgiving can look really good from the outside. It can really look like we're doing what we're supposed to. It can look generous. It can look responsible. It can look helpful. It can look spiritual. And it can look selfless. And isn't that what most women feel like we have embedded into our DNA is to do all those things? We want to be generous. We want to be helpful. We want to serve. But underneath, it can actually quietly drain our energy. It can drain our identity. We can lose our peace. And we can even get to the place where we lose our emotional capacity. Most of the time, women don't get to that place of becoming exhausted because we don't care. That's simply not the case. We're exhausted because we care so much for so long without taking the time to have true restoration, to really come back and look at ourselves and allow ourselves time to rest, to recuperate, and to give ourselves what we need. So, the first thing that comes to mind in this discussion is that overgiving often starts with really good intentions. We never start out giving so much that we intend to lose track of who we are. It doesn't start from a bad place. It starts from a place of genuine care and concern and desire to serve and to do well. It begins with love. It begins with compassion. It begins with responsibility, wanting to serve and wanting to be faithful. It begins with wanting to help. You want to help. You want to be dependable. You want to make life easier for others. You want to prevent conflict sometimes. I know as a mother with 5 kids, I often was playing mediator in between two or more of them, trying to keep peace in the house. You want to prevent disappointment. Oftentimes, we don't want to cause disappointment. We want to prevent that. And we want to prevent pain. And that's not coming from a bad place. It's coming from a kind and caring and loving and generous place. But as caregivers, as mothers, as people in ministry, women in ministry, leaders, entrepreneurs, giving often becomes part of our role. It really just becomes embedded in our job description almost. And over time, the line between love and self-abandonment can really start to get a little fuzzy and blurry. Like those things really start to cross over and it's really hard to separate out those two things where love and self-abandonment kind of become muddied waters, so to speak. You, I often say yes before checking in with myself. I have learned to stop a little sooner, make sure my yes is yes, my no is no, but don't say yes until I'm ready to say yes and I'm ready to weigh the consequences of what saying yes can mean. Sometimes we take on responsibility for things that are not fully ours to carry. We feel guilty if we can't take on the needs and try to meet all those needs that we see because we want to solve, we want to help, we want to serve, we feel like it's part of our job to love. And sometimes if we don't do that, we feel guilty. However, overgiving oftentimes drains our identity and it drains our energy. Over time, overgiving can slowly disconnect us from our own needs. It can disconnect us from our own desires and our emotions and our own limits and our limitations. We start to slowly begin to lose touch with actually what we want. We might not know what we need until we realize we don't have it. We don't have what we need. And now we're depleted. And so now the bucket is empty. The cup is completely dry. And so then overgiving drains our identity and it drains our energy. Overgiving slowly disconnects us from our own needs, from our own desires, our own emotions, and our own limitations. Before we know it, we might begin to lose touch with what we actually want, what we actually need. The bucket starts to become so empty, the cup is empty instead of overflowing. And then before long, we might not even know what we need until we have been completely depleted and that cup, there's nothing left in it. We can't pour any more from that empty vessel. And so then a lot of times that leads to resentment. We resent the people that we're serving. We resent what we're doing. And then we feel guilty because we're feeling resentful. And then that hidden resentment turns into this signal. If we listen closely enough, it's often a symbol that something has just gone wonky. It's out of balance. And overgiving then starts to create this vicious cycle where we feel like we've given so much and we have nothing left to give and we're so resentful. And then we have this guilt and shame. And shame is a really low vibration and we don't operate well. It's actually the opposite of love. And so instead of serving because we love, now we're feeling shame and guilt instead of doing what we meant to do in the first place. Overgiving, a lot of times will show up as exhaustion. It'll show up as irritability, especially around that time of the month. It'll show up as emotional numbness. We start to lose our creativity. We start to lose our joy. We don't find joy in even the little things anymore, let alone the big things. It's really hard to hold on to joy when we're feeling so strained and where we've just become so depleted from overgiving. We start to feel unseen, really invisible. We start to feel taken for granted. And that's where some of the resentment comes in because we feel like we've been taken for granted. We find it difficult to rest and we find difficult to receive. We really have a hard time asking. We have a hard time asking for help. We have a hard time allowing ourselves permission to rest, permission to take a break, permission to say no. And then from a physical standpoint, this turns not just from into an emotional issue, it turns into a physical issue where the nervous system then begins to live with this constant output that really puts us into fight or flight instead of rest and digest, peace and at ease. So sympathetic versus parasympathetic. Giving without receiving then creates depletion, and serving without rhythm starts to create burnout. Responsibility without boundaries creates this resentment. And again, it becomes this vicious cycle that's really hard to get out of unless we take a moment and pause. And I think the other thing that overgiving does is it actually becomes this false identity. You know, we don't want to disappoint, we don't want to let people down. And we come from a place of love, and when we come from a place of really having the best intention, but many women begin to believe that their value comes from being needed. If I don't do X, Y, Z, then they're not going to need me. And then that becomes part of this kind of false identity that we take on. So being helpful can be linked and tied then to being loved. If I don't do this, then I'm not going to be loved. Becoming available and being available can become tied to being accepted. If I'm not available all the time, then they're not going to accept me. They're not going to love me. Becoming strong then becomes tied to our sense of worth. If I'm not strong, if I show any sign of weakness, then I'm not worthy or I don't live up to the standard that I've set for myself or what I believe other people have set for me. And so that creates this place where we just don't feel comfortable when we're not needed. We don't feel like if I'm not needed, then I'm not comfortable with that place where maybe it's okay, to let go of that need to be needed. And it creates this anxiety when I feel like, or we feel like we might have disappointed somebody or let them down. And then we feel responsible not just for giving, but also for the emotional state of this other person or people that we're trying to serve. This creates a pattern where our identity becomes built around our usefulness and our resourcefulness and what we can give and what we can do and how we can serve. Except the real dichotomy here is that we're not valuable because we're useful. We're not valuable because of what we can do or what we can say or how we can serve. Our value lies simply in being who we are. Our worth isn't measured in how much we can give and how much we can carry and how much responsibility we can take on. And our calling is not the same thing as our constant accessibility and our constant availability. Giving is a beautiful thing. I have a servant's heart. I love to serve and I love to give. And serving is so meaningful. Loving others is a great thing to do. It has such worth and has such value. So the problem is not our generosity. The problem is when we give from a state of depletion, when we give out of guilt, when we give out of fear, when we give out of obligation, and when we give out of this place where we have our this kind of wonky, weird identity that's not really true. And so we have this identity confusion. Healthy giving flows from a place of love, but not pressure. We do it because we love and we want to, not because we feel pressured, either consciously or subconsciously. Healthy responsibility honors our capacity. What can I do and what can I not what can I not do? What do I have the capacity for and where does that capacity end? And so I can be loving, we can be loving without having this endless availability to others. I can be generous without disappearing. I can serve without abandoning myself. Alignment comes when we give from this place of overflow instead of a place from depletion where my cup overflows instead of I'm trying to scrape out the last drop at the bottom of the cup. And so, if this is something that has resonated with you, I've shared all these things. If you're going, oh, I recognize that girl, that's me, notice, just take notice. Where are you giving? Where it's just become this automatic thing that you do instead of an intentional thing that you choose. Notice where you might be resentful because you have now all of a sudden see that there's a boundary that has been crossed or that there wasn't a boundary to begin with. Notice where resentment might be pointing to this capacity issue that I've described, where you've reached the level of given to the point of too much. And now I'm feeling depleted and overwhelmed. And then notice where you might be giving out of fear. Where have you given out of guilt or shame? Where have you given out of depletion? I've created this alignment check, and it can help you to pause and reflect where you may be out of alignment, where things might not be quite the way you would like them to be. It's not a scorecard. It's no quiz that anybody is going to turn in and put their little red check marks on it. It's simply a tool for awareness, and it brings clarity and it helps you to reconnect with you. So I've shared a link below. If this resonates with you, I would love for you to have this tool to be able to use. And I would love to have you join the conversation and continue to check in every week. I'm going to be posting these YouTube videos. You can check me out on Spotify. I've started a podcast there. And there's also a blog post on my website. So I would love to have you follow me in this journey where we can learn how to walk in this place of alignment and congruency with who God created us to be. The goal is not to stop giving. The goal is to give in a way that doesn't cost you your peace and your health and your identity and your wholeness. You're allowed to have needs. It's okay to have your needs. And you're allowed to have limits. You're allowed to receive, and you're certainly allowed to matter in this whole equation of the service that we choose to do because we love the people that are around us instead of feeling like we're obligated to do so. You are allowed to matter in that whole big equation. Overgiving may look like love, but alignment, now that teaches us how to love without losing ourselves in the process. So when giving flows from a place of wholeness, it really becomes this thing that gives us life instead of stealing life from us. And we give from a place of overflow instead of from a place of depletion. So I hope that this has touched you in some way this week. I look forward to seeing you along the way in the journey in the weeks to come.